expenditure contracts, so.
It's all good. Welcome to the October Human Resources Committee meeting. Thank you all for being here. As a note, we usually start with a staffing report, but not necessarily on our agenda, but I have the first opportunity publicly to welcome Ms. Kathy Erickson, our new CFO at the district. I believe you started this Monday, correct? Welcome. Thank you for joining us and look forward to working with you. Moving on, so the staffing report, were there any questions on that, fellow board members? Seeing none, we will move on to action items. And this month, we have a couple of first read policies, 2 for the first reading, 1 for a deletion. Any comments on those policies? I know I did email a couple of comments along to you, Mr. Swirsky, about a couple of items I found in policy 401, but
just a couple of notes, and Member Gorham has made some comments too. One of the comments we're looking at is on policy 401, area 2, general statement of policy. The school district also makes reasonable accommodations for disabled employees. The suggestion we have there is it should read, we would make reasonable accommodations for, we can say, employees with a disability is what we suggested adding into there.
And this is an MSBA model policy, correct?
Correct.
So,
yep.
Okay.
What I will say is I did, where you see the opportunity crossed out and promotional opportunities, that is what I added to that policy. So it includes hiring as well as promotional opportunities. And then there was a footnote down here from the MSBA policies, but I think it was not intended to be included. But we did have a similar statement in our old policy about the state statute, chapter 363A of the Minnesota statutes. So I did want to include that in there also, just to make that clear. And then again, any questions or whatever, refer to Human Resources, Senior Human Resource Manager. We did in our old policy, and we're not there yet, the one where we have for deletion, we did have what we call the recruitment plan. And there is a recruitment plan out there. That was approved by the board a number of years ago. It most likely, I would say, needs updating at this point in time. But the one thing I also wanted to add, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of jumping ahead, but if we looked at the proposed deleted policy, the 4010, and I'm looking at basically the very last sentence of that struck out first paragraph. And the school board shall provide resources to implement this plan in every department in the school at all levels of operation. Financially, that really has not been the case to implement that plan in its full entirety. And that was one of the reasons why I didn't include the recruitment plan in this first. It's not meaning that it would go away necessarily, because it's still out there as board approved. But it's not board approved in a policy. It was board approved in one of our meetings that we would follow this. So I'm open. I'm not closed off to including that recruitment plan for this, but
yeah.
One other statement I think I would make, and one of the reasons I did include the two other policies, of which I'll go into a little bit more detail, is the 401 has a cross-reference of those other two policies, so I wanted to make sure we included them in here, as well as the disability non-discrimination is a required policy.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? I guess I'm a little indifferent or not sure about including the plan and policy. I think it sounds like it needs to be updated, and we need to consider what resources we might be able to devote to it. So I guess I'm kind of neutral on it as long as we're intentional about updating a plan and looking at ways we can implement it.
It's kind of in there silently. The plan has not gone away. It's just not referred to in this policy. So it is still a board-approved plan.
Would that be an informational item we could visit at some point in the future?
Sure.
What would be necessary to update it, do you think?
I think what we should do is present the plan as it stands right now. It also includes at the beginning of the plan, this 401, the equal employment opportunity is actually the opening statement to that recruitment plan.
Okay.
So.
Thank you. Any further questions?
I do have a couple more comments I would like to make.
Fair. Yeah.
The disability and non-discrimination policy, again, this is a required policy. It's not one that we had formal in our policies before, so that's another reason to include it. On the veterans preference, we do these point systems in our screening processes when there is a screening process. This formalizes that methodology, but one of the points a couple things I want to point out on the page 10 on the bottom. The Veterans Preference Act, there's a number of positions that it does not apply to in its entirety, and it has to do with educational systems. It talks about relation to a school board or school district, but the provisions of the policies apply to teachers only with respect to the hiring process as set forth in paragraph F above. That only applies to teachers, but the whole policy applies to all the other employees of the district. And what Mrs. Kinnear and I were just discussing prior to this, F talks about when you use a 100-point system and there is a veteran's preference, we add those points into it. If there's not a need to use a 100-point system or a screening document, for instance, if we only have 3 applicants and we're going to interview all 3 of them, there's no point to screen, then we don't add points and we don't use that point preference. I think we want to make that same judgment with non-teaching positions, non-certified positions. So if there are only 3 applicants, we might not necessarily always use a screening document. We'll just interview all 3 applicants, and I think we're going to introduce another sentence in there that maybe clarifies that.
I think that's a good clarification. All right. Seeing no further questions, that will conclude the Human Resources Committee meeting for October. I believe I'm not missing anything. I'll double check. Thank you all. And we're just going to switch gears here. Member Trinka is unable to join us, and so that means I'll hop right into facilitating the Business Committee meeting. So let's get our stuff up here. All right.
Just haven't seen you yet today.
And welcome, Kathy, to your first Business Committee meeting. So first things first, we have financial report items. Any informational pieces or questions folks have? Looks like our
It's all pretty standard on the financial report. This was the first month. that-
microphone, please.
Pretty standard on the financial report, but this is the first month that we have APU numbers on the report.
Member Oswald.
Thank you. I know that Member Trinka had mentioned that she would like this to be started being explained to us a little by little, like a teaching moment of the month during the business committee meeting. And I'm not expecting that today, obviously, but I don't know if Kathy, you're aware of that and how soon you'd like to begin. But I think the board really would like some help in understanding all of these numbers besides just seeing them. So I definitely appreciate it when it can get done.
Superintendent.
I would like to talk a little bit about the APU report to that thought. Just so you kind of know what you're looking at here. And I'm just going to talk about the top section where it says October enrollment. That is the enrollment for, as where we are right now. The progression is what we expect there to be at the end of the year. And so that's where we do our multiplications on the weights of students, and then on the far right you see that preliminary end of the year. And so that is what we are projecting that we will have at the end of the year for an APU. And then if you follow that down and compare it to our projected APUs, you see that right now we would expect to end the year about 18.57 above our projected number. That is why, as we go through, that is the number that we continue to watch. It's based on historical numbers, so we take our October numbers. In other years, in October when we're at this number, here's where we ended, and then we do that for every month throughout the year. Of course, the closer we get to the end of the year, the more accurate that projection will be. But that is where we are right now. So we are pretty close for our staffing and our enrollment projections. So
Thank you,
hope
Superintendent.
that helps a bit.
Seeing no other comments or questions, we have no bids, RFPs, or quotes. So that brings us into policies and regulations. We have, let's see here, a second reading of policy 722, which would replace policy 108 around public data requests. Any comments on what we have here in front of us? It would be second reading at our board meeting next week and would be approved at that time. All right.
I have a question.
Member Oswald, thank you.
On section 4A on page 20, in the very top paragraph, it says all requests for public data must be made in writing, directed to the responsible authority, and then it was added that a member of the public may use the data request form which appears at the end of this policy or submit a written request which must include the following information. No matter what, does that form or the written request have to be mailed, or can it be emailed?
Superintendent.
I think the intent would be either email or mail or dropping it off in person in writing. However we get it, as long as it's in writing.
Okay.
And not just a verbal request.
Okay. Okay, I guess I don't see that intent in here. Is that something that we could clarify or put in some clarifying language? Because the way I understand this is it's a written request, but we're not told really what to do with it, except on the form it says to mail, I believe. Let me look at the form again. I could be wrong, but. Yeah, the form doesn't necessarily say either, so. I guess I would like to say that you see a line in there that just says email or mail or in-person delivery or something like that is acceptable. Something along that line, if that's okay.
On the form or in the policy?
In the policy. The form is fine too, I guess. I didn't really consider that, but.
I think if I'm understanding you right, on the form, on the second page where it says note, talks about them providing contact information, however you want Duluth schools to mail or email you copies of data to you. Is that what you're referring to?
No, I'm referring to how the data request is delivered to the school district.
Okay.
I think it would be in our interest to be as specific as possible.
We could add a sentence to the end of that paragraph where it says a member of the public may use the data request form, which appears at the end of the policy, or submit a written request, which must include the following information, and add a section in there that says submit by mail, email, personal delivery, if you wanted.
I think that would be helpful.
Okay.
But I'm just one person, so I don't know what everybody else thinks.
I just wouldn't want some, I don't know if I'm sure we take faxes still, but if we received a random fax somewhere in the community at one of our sites and someone thought that was getting through it, if we're not clear, it may expose us to an issue.
Right. Do you want it to say something about received at the business services office or central offices?
Yes, I think being that specific would be good.
Thank you. Any?
This is a second reading. Do you want that put in for next week's board meeting? Because it would be approved or passed.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments on policies? All right. Seeing none, we move on to contracts, change orders, and leases. We have 2 contracts on here, plus this is the additional one we weren't able to get in our board packet. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. So we've got one from Northland Consulting Engineers, the City of Duluth for school resource officers, as well as one from Fond du Lac College for
CATS classes.
college in the schools. Any questions on those? All right.
Me.
Oh, sorry, Member Oswald, go ahead. Just missed you.
I see this school resource officer agreement, recognizing it from prior years, of course, and I understand it comes from the city, not from us. Is this their contract? And so I'm just wondering how this relates to any community feedback on the role of a school resource officer within our schools, or are those 2 separate issues?
Well, considering this contract, I did share it both with Stefan Witherspoon and Carl Crawford to get some feedback on the language for the contracts and the description of them, to see if they had any concerns with the language in it, and they did not.
Thank you. That's what I'd like to hear.
Any further questions? All right. right. So change orders and leases, we have a couple placeholders. Don't know if we have any updates on those items. All right. Doesn't look like it. We'll move on to resolutions. We'll have one on acceptance of donations, as well as a resolution to authorize a new bank account signer. Who might that be? All right. Seeing no questions or comments on that. Oh, sorry, Member Oswald.
Sorry, I'm dragging this meeting out, apparently.
No,
I was just curious as to the donation, the district-wide donation for outstanding hot lunch balances where no school is specified, and wondering how that $250 is going to be allocated within the schools.
Peggy might be able to speak more to this, but I believe that at the end of the year, the losses that are incurred by the district are for the district, not specific sites, and so it just comes off of that, the loss sheet for the district.
But doesn't some of the debts go to collections with some people? And so how would that affect what is owed by those parents?
Yes, some do go to collections that are, I believe, over $50. The donation can be designated for a certain site or a certain family. There is, the Child Nutrition Office has developed a protocol for applying those. I don't recall what it is off the top of my head, but we can certainly get you a copy of that.
Sure. Well, that's why I'm asking, because this one says there's no school specified on it. So I just was curious since it's going to the district. So
I know there is a difference between, well, students who receive free lunch wouldn't apply, but students who receive reduced price lunch, there's different protocols for those who do not qualify for either free or reduced. So I think it has something to do with that, and we can get back to you with Pam's protocols. Pam's protocols.
Very good. Let's see, we were going through, where were we here? Oh yeah, just getting through resolutions. Informational items, we had expenditure contracts. Any questions there? Member Oswald.
hi again. The very first item of InterQuest canines, I know I had sent an email and I have not received any response to that. When we discussed this contract last year, we, as a board, had asked that we be informed of the effectiveness of this company and kind of some information on what they're finding, if they're finding anything, and how it's being viewed as necessary. And so I'm just reiterating that here to wonder, can we expect that information?
I know that. I saw an email about just a little bit ago. The dog handler from InterQuest logs all of the hits the dogs encounter when in our buildings. We will request that information and share that with you as soon as possible. It is difficult to determine the impact of the random searches on students not bringing substances into the building. So we, you didn't have that as, you don't know who's not bringing it because of it. There's no way to measure that. But that was from Tanya saying that she has asked for the impact.
And I understand that, as the contract stated, it's kind of an unannounced visit, so if it were to say decrease bringing of substances to school, it's the threat that they could be checked. So, okay. And we'll see some information in our email inboxes, it sounds like, when we're able to get it. Appreciate that. Any anything else. Let's see.
Over here.
Member Loeffler, count. Thank you.
Thanks. I just had a question under facilities, and this would be for you, Mr. Spooner, probably, but with John Hoban and the vacant building heat inspections during the winter, now that we have less buildings, is that amount similar to what we paid him last year, or has it gone down? Or am I just not understanding that?
It'll be up to
He's paid by the hour, and it's based on hours worked, and we do have one less building, so ultimately it will be less money than we paid last year.
This contract is up to that amount, that's not a lump sum or the amount that he'll get necessarily. It's just up to that amount.
Member Oswald?
I have a question regarding the Cloquet Transit Services.
Yes.
Knowing that this is for the transportation of a single student who's open and enrolling, I'd like to know how it's advantageous that we're providing transportation for that student when we fight to transport our own kids between schools in the city.
Kathy and I were just discussing this. I too have questions about this. I do know that this is a student. I'm not quite sure how you know which specific student it's for. But this is a student who has gone here for several years, and there was a change from an agreement with Cloquet. We're continuing to work on this, and am currently considering this as a temporary fix for a student to be able to continue to go to school after Cloquet discontinued the service that they're providing. However, the transportation is included in the student's IEP, and so it is a service that I believe we would be responsible for ultimately, although we've had an agreement with Cloquet for several years. So something that Kathy and I are continuing to work on.
I understand the open enrollment part in your IEP, or the transportation included in your IEP, but doesn't normally apply when it's an open enrolled student. We don't ever. Is there any other student in our district that we provide transportation for that open enrolls with us? Not that we don't want them to come here. We love that they come here, but
I don't know that off the top of my head. And again, I'm not totally comfortable discussing an individual student who could be identified through this conversation. So I don't want to get into the details.
okay. And I just have a second comment about the foster grandparent program contracts, and I already pointed them out to Jackie, and so she said, that's kind of weird. In case you want to know. That may not be an exact quote. Sorry, Jackie, if you're listening. As I scroll to them, the foster grandparent program MOU between the Catholic Charities and Homecraft on page 87, or no, 88, maybe 89. Okay, try 89. On item B23, it's bolded and says ISD 709 states there will be no additional sites other than Homecraft where there will be foster grandparents, apparently. But then you scroll to the very next page and it's a foster grandparent MOU for MacArthur, which doesn't have that bolded statement included in their contract.
Strange.
So I just wanted to point that out to make sure that that gets taken care of and there's not some misunderstanding with Catholic Charities.
All right. Questions, comments on no-cost contracts? Facilities report, Mr. Spooner? Anything to say there? We've had a little action lately.
It's been a busy month. We, as you can see from the report, we We've accomplished typically roughly the same number of work orders. I actually spoke at a Congdon PTA meeting to Congdon PTA members of the community regarding the rodent issue. So we assured members that we are using the safest, most efficient method to. We're actually in a preventative maintenance mode to ensure rodents don't reinfest right now, and that's critical to prevent that reinfestation to happen. So we had a good conversation at Congdon. We've got a couple vacancies that we are reposting. We're very close on the Hartley land sale. That's at the title company right now, being prepared to close on that with the city. I'm finalizing the Rockridge lease. That's with our attorney again, and we should be seeing the final document shortly and getting that to the Hills to see if they agree, and that will be, I'm thinking, a month or less till that's completed. One of the next item that you'll notice is regarding the P2000 software, and that's part of one of the contracts that were signed. And this gets into electronic devices or electronic software, just like your computer, that becomes obsolete. The P2000 system is our access control system, and we initially started using that in 2006 at Lowell Barnes. And now JCI, the parent company that owns P2000, they acquired Simplex, Grinnell, and Tyco. So the companies they acquired had a software package. JCI had a software package. They evaluated both, and they said, theirs is better than ours. We're getting rid of P2000. So what we have is no longer sold. It's no longer supported. And we're transitioning to the CCure 9000. Nobody will notice a difference. Their ID badges will work the same. It functions the same. It will run on all our controllers. And we negotiated to be a beta tester, not in the software aspect, but in the development of the owner's manual, the written format of how people resolve issues. And that saved us, I don't have the document handy, but I think it saved us roughly $47,000. And we've got a well-qualified person, Corey Karen, to help them with that, and it worked out well for both us and for them. The next item, I talked about some terrazzo issues that are occurring at Denfeld. I haven't had any evaluation done yet on that. Another issue at Congdon, we had an 89-year-old clay sewer pipe fail, which I notified the board members. I'm hoping to have that repaired over MEA. And then just some general other items. Lincoln Park Middle School achieved an Energy Star Award. They had a score of 75, which is the minimum score you can get to achieve Energy Star, but yet achieving Energy Star is still a good thing for us to have. I mean, it identifies that we use approximately 35% less energy than other buildings of similar size and nature and use. So that was a good thing that we were able to accomplish through working with Minnesota Power at no cost to have that survey done. Under capital construction, another contract that has been signed is the Historic Old Central Building Audit. I hope to have information prepared by the design professionals along with InSpec, who did the building envelope in 2016. I hope to have some form of presentation to have to the business committee meeting early, maybe January or February timeframe. They'll be available for any questions the board might have, and they'll be able to give us a relatively accurate number of what it would cost to, if we want to stay in this building for the next 50 years, what's it going to cost to update heating, ventilating, convert steam to hot water, finishes, carpet. The board will have the information that they need to know, do we invest here or do we look at alternatives? I also identified the track replacement for next year. I'm starting early on some of these projects, but it's better to be ahead than be behind when we bid for projects. So that was the next FY20 project. Moving on, the Ordini's gym project, I think, was completed last week. I know we've had some good feedback. The The gym floor finish was completely sanded down to wood, and it's been refinished, and it really brightened the gym up. That looked really nice. We've filled some vacant positions in building operations, and health and safety had a relatively normal month. Playground inspections were completed district-wide. Jason talked about ALICE training. We had 3 recordable OSHAs. We had 20 first report of injuries. And then below that, I've just got the EPA documents. So that kind of concludes that, and I can answer questions if anybody has any.
Member Loeffler-Kemp.
Yeah, a couple things. Thank you. As always, appreciate the thoroughness of your report. I had a couple questions. One, in terms of, let me see, that it was staffing for, I'm trying to find it now. The AutoCAD and the master electrician. Were those internal candidates that were hired?
We've had retirements, or people have left, and they're vacancies.
They're vacancies.
We
okay.
have not hired anybody.
Okay. And then the other question was down to the Civil Rights Commission walkthrough that was conducted at Denfeld and East High School. What was that?
Superintendent Gronseth probably can give the total breadth of the Civil Rights Commission review, but my part or my role that I played in that was I had to give the MDE inspector a complete tour of the building to look at all ADA compliance of both high schools.
Okay.
So we went from top to bottom, every room, looked at door handles, looked at under sinks, looked at bathroom stalls. We inspected all of our buildings, and I believe we did fairly well.
In addition to the buildings, there was also a review of access to programs and classes and all of our documents, our forms, and we are just reviewing the findings of that. And it was a pretty positive experience, and I think there's a few things that we have to make some adjustments. Maybe some of our handrails were a little loose in one of the bathrooms, and cover up some pipes, but we'll have that report to you after we review it.
Okay, excellent. Will we be sharing that with the city as well, the commission maybe for the city on disabilities? Just, they might be interested, I don't know. I'd be interested.
It wasn't part of our plan.
Okay, good. Something to think about. And then, let me see, what was the other thing? Oh, and just great job on the Lincoln Park Energy Star Award.
Any other questions on that item? All right. I think the last item we have a letter from Mark Knutson about volunteering on district property. Superintendent or Mr. Spooner, did you want to speak to that at all?
We've been working with a parent group, a community group interested in making improvements to the Homecraft facilities. I've been going back and forth. Originally they sent an application for a delineation, but the application that they sent me was blank. And so I've been trying to get the filled-in form from them. And that was what I opened, and it shut down my computer. So we haven't been able to see any of the plans. I know that one of the pieces that we've talked about, as we've talked about long-term plans for Homecraft, and I can tell you when I was principal, it was a concern then with the field next to Homecraft, and at that time the entire playground was wet, and really it was difficult to even use the playground in the spring before we remodeled because the water would build up, and there was actually a stream that ran. It was probably drainage. It wasn't a stream, but it ran like a stream in the spring right through the playground. When we remodeled, we did raise the entire playground area and a little bit beyond, and put drainage in, and so now the playground is dry and playable for the majority of the year. The field, however, remains wet, and in the spring there is sitting water, and if there's heavy rains, there's water there. There's a stream that runs parallel to the entire property, and so it is a wetland right there as well. And so to do any improvements to that needs to have a delineation for wetlands, and it also needs drainage. Our long-term plan would be to make improvements to that field. It's down the road a ways on the 10-year plan, but our plan would include full drainage of the field, so that when it's done, it works. Our fear is that if we just put more dirt on the field without having drainage, that water is still going to be there, and it's still going to have drainage issues. It's still going to be mud and unusable. So I, however, am not a site development expert, and so we did reach out and get some advice on this. Also, my inexperience with using volunteer labor on site projects, I wanted to get some advice on that. We did reach out to Mark Knutson, who we often work with on issues of real estate and development and projects and things like that, and that is the letter that is included here. His advice and our initial reaction was that we really need to, if this project is going to be done, it needs to be done with a contract with the district that has insurance that covers us in cases of liability, but is also for the long term best for the district. So if we are to continue with the community group, I think that it's important that it be to district standards, that it include drainage, and that there's a contract in place that covers the district in cases of liability, both in the process of having it done, but long-term liability for the district as well. And so, this, believe me, as principal there, I would have loved to seen the field done and usable and good drainage in place, but I also think that it's important that it's done right. And so, I guess we're looking for some board guidance on how you'd like to move forward, knowing that our recommendation is that unless it's done to district standards and meet the criteria that Mr. Knutson has laid out, that that's the only way that we could be involved.
Member Oswald.
How does this project differ from the parents that totally designed and constructed the natural play space at Lowell that was built entirely by parent volunteers?
We were not aware of that space next to the playground being built, and once we knew that it was there, we did go back in with our insurance company to find out what would have to be done to be covered by the liability. I don't know if you were involved with that, Mr. Spooner.
I was involved when I learned of what had been constructed. It was work done by hand, people with hand tools, and they had put logs and stumps and different things. And I worked with our insurance company, and I worked with a group, and I identified how they would have to make changes to make it safe so students didn't climb on something and fall and get hurt. I honestly still don't like it. I think it's not safe, but it's as safe as it can be in that for that type of play apparatus. It isn't something that's manufactured and built and we construct it and it comes with insurance from Flagship, for example. But the difference, your question related to the difference between Homecroft and Lowell, Homecroft is hundreds of dump trucks dumping fill on our property and large equipment moving fill around. And if it doesn't work, it could be hundreds of thousands of dollars of work that we have to do to even get back to where we're at today. So we're talking a huge amount of work at Homecroft compared to at Lowell. If we didn't like that playscape, our utility crew could, could have it gone in a day. And we're not talking removing something in a day at Homecroft. And at Homecroft, I've spent substantial time working with that group, and the documents that our attorney put together, I did send the Homecroft PTO on July 5th. July 5th, I identified in 5 paragraphs pretty much the exact document that Mr. Knudsen put together of what we would need to allow this project to go forward. Everything from, I would want signed AIA documents with the design professional, with the contractor. I'd want insurance to protect us, both should the design not work or should the contractor break our bituminous or run over a student or run over a fence. Performance and payment bonds to protect the district and the taxpayer. Should next June or July, you're out there and it's a mud hole. We need documents in place that protect our interest and the taxpayer interest should this not work. And I've expressed those needs months ago to this group, but the response I get is I'm going to talk to Superintendent Gronseth, and I've asked over and over for that, and I have not been able to move forward.
And so there's a lot of assumptions being made, and if we haven't seen the plan yet, we don't know if these are even addressed. So
I've got a minimal plan, which I have it's a 2-sheet plan. I evaluated it. I got back to the design professional they hired, and I don't know if you want me to read all this correspondence, but he told me that he wasn't contracted to do what I saw necessary to be contained in that plan to have that designed with enough information for a contractor to follow it. And even something like construction observation was not included. He wasn't going to observe any construction. It was all up to the contractor. It's essentially a design build. The design professional would tell the contractor, I don't know who the contractor is, but he would say, this is what I want you to build, and he wouldn't observe it and ensure it's getting built. The contractor would just do it.
I'm not comfortable in making any decision or recommendation until you guys all sit down and talk, I think, is really the next step. I would like there to be some communication direct with each other to see a plan, to understand what might need to be changed, and to work together, because we don't know, and I'm not comfortable making a decision based on a lawyer's interpretation of what should be done and that kind of stuff that protects us. Yes, that's necessary, but maybe it fits most of it, and maybe it can be tweaked, and nobody knows. So I would really appreciate some communication between the two groups involved, obviously.
There's been substantial communication that I've had, not recently. We've tried to meet, but we haven't. I've provided my thoughts on how the field would be designed if we were doing it, if we had the funds, and they don't have the funds to do that. And it's my belief that if I'm going to do my job and do it diligently for the school district, I'm going to direct design professionals to put plans and specifications together for a building or for a field that is going to last for 50 years, that's going to be efficient to maintain, that's going to work well for recess or for soccer groups. I'm going to build it to be conducive for all uses and be efficient. And what I have seen and what I know of this plan is it's a temporary fix that might work. And I'm not willing, personally, I would not recommend to take on a project that might work, because I don't want to be in June or July of next year, just like I was at Congdon when there were rodents. I don't want to be standing in mud on TV explaining why I'm standing in mud, and I didn't have any input in how it was designed. That's just not something that I would recommend.
And Roswell, do you have a response? Or
Oh, I do, but you can go to
Chair Kirby.
Thanks. Well, it seems to me that if we have legal advice saying that we can't move forward until we have all of these things, and if you've told this group that we need them and they don't provide them, it seems to me that we should, there's no need for further communication other than to maybe tell them that, again, they need to provide this until that, it's not a go. I mean, I appreciate the parents putting all the effort into it, but I think that we have to protect our own liability.
I would have to recommend that on any construction of any nature, that donations are very welcome, they're appreciative, but donations need to be given monetarily, and the school board accepting the donations, and then the district manages the construction of whatever it is. It's really difficult to have another group manage construction and we're not involved in it. It's on our property and we have to maintain it, and we're liable for it for years to come.
Superintendent?
I think Mr. Spooner pretty much has covered it. I did want to mention that we have met all together along with the principal, and at that time had said what we needed to be able to move forward, and we haven't moved beyond that. In my last communication with the group, they said that the drainage was going to cost $250,000, and they don't have that, and they'd like to move forward with the plan that they have, and that's one of the key points for us, is that it have drainage, and so that we know that it would make a difference. I mean, we can get together and say the same thing that we said before, but I don't think that there's new information here to discuss.
I think I've said it multiple times via email, and I'm looking in my notes, or my emails actually, and as late as September 4th, I wrote to Melissa and I said, I as the owner's rep would need to sign the document, and I'm talking about the delineation form, prior to submission to the City of Rice Lake to begin the delineation review. However, I will not sign a document that is not completed by your design professional, as well as I need to have an opportunity to review the completed document. They wanted me to sign a blank document, which I wouldn't do. Then I said the delineation is the first step to be completed and approved to begin the design phase. So I know you do not have a design done yet, but once preliminary drawings and specs are completed, I would like to meet. And then again, I reiterated, please don't forget that similar to all projects, I need contracts and insurance documents from all designers and contractors. As stated earlier, I know they are donating their time and labor, but for them to perform work on district property, I still need the documents. If you can provide the firms and names, we can draft those for signatures and provide them the insurance requirements that we will need. And I haven't had any response to multiple times that I've asked for those documents.
We'll remember Oswald, and then we'll follow, and then I'll have a comment quick.
Well, first of all, I understood the lack of communication when you had said that you've reached out about the delineation and have not received any response. And so we don't know if they did a delineation or not, or how that would have happened. And so that's where it was getting the lack of communication. I understand what you have told them and how that needs to be done, but I don't know what kind of support we're also giving them to help them achieve this, because the donation part of this is huge. The other comment I have is that this big open field, half of it is park property by the city. It's a softball field. There's a softball field on it.
Yeah, but it's our property.
So the memorial field is to some guy that's on our property, and so we're not taking care of that, and it's in shambles.
They put a new sign up this year. They called to get permission from me to put a new sign. It's our
haven't noticed
property.
that yet. But the fence isn't anywhere near nice or anything like that. So if that changes what I was thinking. But that we're not honoring whatever it is that we had, whatever memorial field that is. And so is there an organization around that created that in the first place?
It's way before my time. It's longer than 22 and a half years ago. I honestly don't know who created that. It's a memorial, I believe, for maybe somebody in the room might know. I think it might be a police officer that was killed. I'm not sure. Just kind of rings a bell.
Well, I would think that would be important to figure out in case there is somebody out there that is part of another organization that supports that space. However, they supported it to create it in the first place. If we can get free fill, I know that's a huge amount of what we need to do. How we use that fill is up to us. Yes, I get that. But if we're only going to be butting heads between us and this group, there's no progress ever going to be made. And so we have to work together to see. They're willing to do a lot of the groundwork. I know that, and they're the ones that want this badly, and so we can't keep changing the rules on them every time they talk too, which I know has happened a couple times. But it could just be with new information that we get to. I'm not privy to any of that. So, but I would really wish that you guys would sit down in the same room and figure out, does this move forward or not together without the board getting involved, because this is a volunteer thing that we don't get enough volunteers, and then people say, well, I tried to volunteer and we shut them down, and that's not good for our reputation either.
When you brought up Phil, Member Oswald, it sounds generic to people that don't do a lot of construction, but in a field it's very critical that you have fill of a specific nature that doesn't have rocks in it, that is, I would put sand in it if I were doing it, but because you want the material to drain the water. The water has to go through it. It can't stay in pockets. It can't pond. And when I talked to the design professional, he wasn't hired to specify the fill, and you have to. That's just one example. It just popped into my head when you said fill. These are the things that I keep asking for that I don't get answers to. And sure, free fill is great if you don't want to do anything on it, but if you want to have a nice playable surface that works well, sheds water and stays green and grows grass, then you need a specific, your section of earth would be drainage, it might be rock, there might be a filter blanket, there might be 14, 16 inches of sand, you might have 10 inches of screen topsoil, but you need specifications on all those materials, and then probably sod, and they're going to use seed. There's just not a lot of, they don't have the money to do it the way that I would do it, and I want to do it right if we're going to do it. I don't have any more to add there, I guess.
I just add one more piece, that the piece that they're talking about isn't the whole field. If I'm correct on that, it's part of the field.
You are correct, but from what the plan has changed, it's the entire field.
Member Lowfall.
So just a couple observations. One, I think it's a poor preference. Now I've forgotten my whole chain of thought, because in a way I'm just blown away by our board passions getting kind of in the way of listening to our experts and reading the letter from the lawyer. I as much as we want to support the volunteers at Homecroft, they also have to understand that there's precedents and policies and things to do. And I just feel like we as a board need to make sure that we don't always get so integrated into their problem. You have adopted this project as, well, it sounds like it. You are just so adamant that David Spooner has to, accept what this committee is doing. Okay. So I want to say that it's a poor precedence, though, to start down a road of asking volunteers to raise money and then they dictate what we have to use it for. I think of all the times that I'm out raising money for programs in our district and going through the process of getting it approved by us and using the experts in our district to help me understand where the money that we raise for speech, theater. David, I wasn't in charge of the theater this last year, but we didn't follow precedents there either, and I understood that extension had to come down, and we took the advice of our expert and did what he asked us to do, because that's what you do when you are trying to work with a district. And yeah, it was frustrating not to have communicated beforehand, but we listened to our district experts. This is a no-brainer for me. I would not support the Homecroft volunteers going forward with this project, because our letter from our lawyer clearly states it's a bad idea. But I would encourage the parents, is there other ways and this has been kind of an ongoing project maybe at Homecroft for a few years. I remember listening to it before I was on the board. So maybe last fall.
I'm thinking.
So what do they need? They need space to be outdoors, environmental space at Homecroft. So this is a vacant lot that they'd like to make usable.
It's in the 30s, I think it was a cow pasture. It's probably the size of 2 soccer fields. And it's fairly low, it's a wetland, and the kids do use it at recess at times, and sometimes it's wet and sometimes it's dry. And their goal is to make it more usable. And I guess after thinking about it here, if the board directed, I'd be agreeable to building less of a field than what I would desire, but I would not back down on my statement that we need to have AIA documents, we need to have insurance, and we need to have performance and payment bonds to protect our interests going forward if the field doesn't work, if somebody gets hurt, if something gets damaged. So I think the people at this table need to decide, are we willing to accept less than what we would build if we had the money? And if the answer is yes, I don't think there's any movement on ensuring we have all the paper trail to protect our interests. So that, just as Mark Knutson had stated, building it the way we want to build it should be the top priority, and that is mine, and contracts, insurance, and bonds are top priority. So I don't know where I'm really going with this. I'm just saying that.
Mm-hmm. I don't know where I'm going with it either. I just think that I just think that listening to your comments a little bit, I was listening to it on my phone as I was coming here, and reading the document from our lawyer. That was kind of my big aha. I don't have any of the other documents from any other, so it's always frustrating to me as a board member that some of us have more information than others. So when I come to the meeting, I have no background that you have, none. And so how does that happen? Because then I don't feel then I'm making assumptions that I don't want to make, because some of us have more information than others. And then my overall comment as well to my fellow board members is that I'm trying to learn how to be a good board member. But that line between what's micromanaging and what is our role as a board is always present in my mind. And I'm not being disrespectful to each of us. We're all trying to do the best thing for kids. But I also think that as board members, we have a bigger picture to look at than trying to help our Homecroft families and volunteers. We gave them direction, and they're trying to do what they're doing, and we're kind of at a standstill. And I think as a board, there's so many other crucial issues going on right now. I know to the Homecroft people who have raised the money, they're going to listen to this on their tape, and they're not going to be happy. I do. I mean, now and then, then Mr. Spooner throws into the mix. Maybe we could do a little section. We could take the money they've raised, but I can't see giving this project any of our district money. I cannot have this project take any. I know that there's crucial things. The Denfeld site is crumbling, and that's an unexpected expense that's going to cause us. We have some pipes at Congdon that are needing desperate attention, and this is a project that is not at a point where it is an emergency to do anything. And as much as I would like to have more usable outdoor facilities at Homecroft, that's not a priority right now. Can it stay on the back burner as much as the volunteers and the people who've raised the money don't want to hear it? Right now, they've got to understand that as a board, at least in my opinion, I've got to support Mr. Spooner, who knows he's an expert on everything he has, and our lawyer, who clearly shares with us some issues that concern me. So I would vote to put this on the back burner for sure.
All right. Well, we've been on this issue for a while. Member Leffler-Kemp, you go ahead. And then I'll speak, and then Member Oswald will come back to you.
Sure.
Just let's keep our focus of our conversation on governance. Sure. And I believe the superintendent asked for guidance, so let's try to keep our conversation there. And
yep, and that's my comments. It's just that I appreciated this letter and the guidance it provided us. I have had Homecroft parents contact me over the year or so that this has been going on, so I'm familiar with it. But I also have been in contact with Mr. Spooner, and you have kept us updated on this project, and I appreciate your diligence on it, and I think it's extremely important that any group of volunteers that want to do something good for our schools, particularly with our facilities, that we're following good procedures and legal procedures and procedures that are recommended by our facility director in this particular case. So I guess my comments are I support what's stated by our lawyers, and I don't want us to. I want to move forward appropriately. So, yeah.
Go ahead, Member Oswald.
I just wanted to clarify that what I was asking for was that the district and the parents work together to find a common vision on this project. That's really all I wanted to see, so that the parents don't walk away all upset and the district doesn't have to be mad that they're trying to do something that we don't want them to do. I was looking for that guidance as to when they first started this project, I thought it was the whole field at the beginning, but I thought it was even knocked down to about a third of the field now. So, I mean, there's even questions on how much and why it's needed. Is there is no open green space at Homecroft that's usable. There's just the playground. There's no place to have an outside gym class. There's no place for teachers to bring kids out in the big space. Just about every other school that I know of has open green space that can be played on outside, and Homecroft doesn't. It is in the district long-range facilities plan, not long-range facility, in the 10-year plan, and I know that it would come up eventually.
Possibly, it's still in the LTFM plan, and I'm still debating the project at Homecroft, Congdon, and Leicester with Sarah Miller. It may or may not be LTFM compliant. I'm still working on that, and our new CFO will be able to help me, I'm sure. And I believe it to be LTFM compliant, and she has indicated not. I've kept it in the plan because I'm hoping to win the argument.
So if it's not LTFM compliant, then we do need these parents to do something to get that space usable. And so this is why I was asking that, see if we can come up with a common vision. If we can't, we can't. But I would like to try.
Good. Superintendent?
I think the heart of the matter comes down to how it's done. We believe it needs drainage. They have indicated that they can't raise enough money for drainage. I would rather wait and do it with drainage, do the whole field, not a portion of the field. Because as Mr. Spooner said too, we don't even know if it'll work just to dump dirt on it and flatten it out. So that's kind of where we are. Our recommendation would be if the plan is, and that's to the point too, we haven't seen plans, but we know that right now it doesn't include drainage, and we wouldn't recommend doing it without drainage. So.
Member Loeffler.
Yeah, I just want to make sure it's heard loud and clear that Mr. Spooner has been in contact and has been working and meeting with this group. I know on a number of occasions, both through email as well as in person, and so I think there's been a lot of attempt to work with this group in a productive way.
I believe Mr. Spooner has stated that they've been unresponsive to his communication methods, and so I don't want to nitpick about that. And that's where I'm asking to sit down for clear communication, so we know this. I believe the administration and the parent group can either put a period after this or figure out how to make it run. I don't know that we need to even make any statement on it.
One final comment. I just want to assume best intentions in all parties involved here. My prerogative would be to protect the interest of the taxpayers and the broader community. We have a lot of needs in the district. On the other hand, I come from public health. I work on these issues. I understand the value of green space and the need for people to play, and I appreciate this group coming together to address an issue. I'm assuming that's the root of it, is getting kids outdoors and playing, and that's a very valuable thing. And so I just want to recognize that. I think moving forward, if I'm going to advise any action, it's to come back together and see what can we do with the chunk of money that we have earned. Is it a smaller field? Is it some other option? There's other options to get kids outdoors and active. It takes a little creative thinking sometimes. That would be my recommendation to the administration. And I'm certainly glad to lend any resources I have in my professional realm.